My name is Jack Klett, Capture's Director of Graduate and Online Initiatives, and I am back with you for yet another Capture webinar. So as usual, we will cover some topics that will illuminate how to make your job a little bit easier. There'll be some clear takeaways, which is always good. And I also give you that checklist, remember, at the end. So a checklist to get you started immediately after we finish our discussion today. If you want to learn more, we can always have a future conversation. Simply visit capturehighered.com and click contact. You'll see the button up there at the top right. You can't miss it. And for everyone who is joining us for the first time for a Capture webinar, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. All right, so let's get to the rundown. I want to show you what's in store for today. So this is all about searching for something new and solving for those identification challenges that we experience in grad. Look, it's difficult to identify prospective graduate student interest. There are a lot of reasons for that. We're going to kick the tires on some of it. Some of it is actually self-imposed. There are things that we have done as graduate enrollment management professionals that have actually made it a little bit more difficult to identify prospective graduate student interest. So we'll talk all about that. And we're also going to have a really smart conversation with Kristen who joins us from Jacksonville University, a cherished Capture partner. So we're certainly happy to have Kristen joining us to share her knowledge and her experience with us as well. We're going to spend a good amount of time talking about new things that we can do with old data that you currently have that's existed at your institutions for quite some time, that if you dig into it a little bit, can reveal some really great new opportunities to allow you to identify further graduate student interest. We're going to spend a good amount of time as well on the idea of behavioral intelligence. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Capture, you know that behavioral intelligence forms the core of what we do as an organization, that it informs all of the enrollment marketing strategies that we employ for our prospective partners. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because there's some things that we can do with behavioral intelligence that do a really solid job of identifying prospective graduate student interest. And as always, we will have opportunities to have more conversations together, either with me or with other experts from the Capture crew. All right, so let's go ahead and get started first with identification challenges. So how is it that we have created for situations where it has become difficult to identify prospective graduate student interest? Well, part of that is because of something that I call ungated content, the problem of ungated content. So you all may remember a time, I certainly remember a time, where the internet was in its infancy. And if people wanted to know about our graduate program offerings, they usually had to contact the university, they had to contact the college and contact the admissions office to find out about what we offered or to find out about the faculty or the curriculum, the content, the pathway to completion of the degree. All of that is now completely available, ungated, in a completely transparent way, typically on yourinstitutions.edu. And that is actually a very good thing. It's important to be as transparent as possible and to have information at the disposal of prospective graduate students. The challenge is, though, that there really isn't a mechanism by which we will collect this individual's data, this prospective student's data, unless they choose to provide it to us, unless they choose to fill out a form or send us an email to ask a question where they can't find the answer readily available in the information online. And that's changed, right? Because before you had to contact the admissions office, you had to send that email. So we have this ungated content that's providing for folks to kind of bypass providing us their contact information. There are also so many platforms now that offer what I refer to as micro search opportunities. So these are those college guide platforms. We're used to them at the undergraduate level, but they certainly exist now in the graduate and adult space. So instead of heading to Google and then checking out the information on the .edu of the college that came up in the search engine results page, prospective students will find themselves on a platform that aggregates all the information of all the various colleges that have that particular program that you just searched for. So the platforms are collecting this data, right? So the prospective students are going to this platform. They're providing the platform their data. In some cases, these platforms will indeed share that data with you. Others are going to charge you for it if you want that data. So we're going to talk a little bit about this in greater detail a bit later. But know that at one time, their visitors would have been your visitors, right? Their data, the data they're collecting, would have been your prospective student data. So again, we're going to talk more about this in a bit. We've heard a lot about the decrease in students who are registering and taking the GMAT, the GRE, other standardized tests. Part of that is because many institutions, many programs have decided to either provide for mechanisms by which one can waive the standardized test requirement, or we have programs that simply are no longer requiring the standardized tests at all. Now, this doesn't mean that I am advocating that you completely avoid things like the GMAT search service or the GRE search service. That still provides value. There's still some really good things that you can do with those services if you do them smartly. So I would certainly advocate for those. But know that because of this decrease in test takers, that some of the efficacy of that search has diminished somewhat. So we're going to talk a little bit about ways in which you can optimize that, modernize it so that you're still getting the return that you would have gotten in years past. All right, declining email engagement. So here's what I'll say about this. Email engagement peaked in 2013. Most recently, the average open rate, so if you take a look at 2017, 2018, 2019 data, the average open rate was around 24% on email. In 2020, that fell, and email open rates fell to about 21%. So this doesn't mean that you should obviously stop using email or email marketing. You should, but you should email smartly, and we'll chat a little bit about what a smart email marketing campaign looks like a bit later. Stealth consumer behavior. So I don't think I'm about to tell you anything that you don't already know. Prospective graduate students are stealthy creatures. Many of us receive a large percentage of stealth applicants. Right now, to be clear, I've never met a stealth applicant that I didn't like. The stealth applicant was still an application that I received in my pool, so I was happy. But look, how many of those stealth prospects were there that never took that step to apply, right? If someone was a stealth applicant, that meant that means that they were a stealth prospect before they completed that application. Well, you have a lot of stealth prospects that never go on to complete that application. And it's because of that you never had the opportunity to communicate your value to these individuals. So how do we actually work to identify these stealthy adult students? We'll spend some time talking about that as well, because identifying stealth prospects really is among your greatest opportunities. And right now, those stealth prospects are a big problem. So to quote our new president, folks, here's the deal. 75% of adult students will bypass traditional enrollment marketing strategies and take their search in their own hands, with many never revealing themselves until they decide to attend an event, submit an application, send that email. We need to be smarter in how we engage so we can identify their interest, because it's through the identification of their interest that we're able to obviously communicate the value of our graduate offerings. So speaking of smart, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, our cherished capture partner, Kristen Kirkendall. Kristen, thank you so much. Welcome to this webinar.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Great, great. Well, listen, for the benefit of our audience, I, of course, have the distinct honor of knowing who you are. But for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Jacksonville, and how did you get into this graduate enrollment management thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kristen Kirkendall. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions and Communications for Jacksonville University. I actually began my career in corporate communications. I graduated from Elon University in 2013 and loved communications, but wasn't as connected to the corporate world, and really had enjoyed my time in college and was passionate about getting back into higher education. And I met the then director of admissions at JU, and we really hit it off. And I joined the JU team in 2017 as a comm coordinator for the admissions department specifically. And then my career just kind of kept growing and building. So in some ways, it found me. And we've just been really focused on graduate and professional studies students in the last year and creating a culture around that student type and that student body at JU. And so that's what has led me here today.
Well, I love it. And look, you and I have discussed this topic before, so this isn't our first rodeo, and I'm glad that you decided to be able to join me for this particular topic, because I know this is an area where you've spent a lot of time. Obviously, you are developing communications that will impact prospective students all across, all the way through your funnel. But that top of funnel work can be an area where we obviously do need to spend a lot of intentional, smart time. So let me just ask you this kind of fairly broad-based general question. Do you think it has become more difficult over the years to identify prospective graduate students, to identify that interest?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. One, I think that we are diversifying how we do graduate programs. So there's more opportunity to join a graduate program without having a specific undergraduate degree. It might just be a small collection of prerequisites. So it makes it a little bit harder to figure out who that target audience is for each program, because they could have majored in psychology but are now going for an MBA. And really, there's no true direct connection. So that makes it a lot broader. I think the other reason is, you mentioned this a little bit, but we know that shoppers today, we want to give them a positive customer service experience, and adult learners like to gather the information on their own time. And so there's this war between giving them information up front so that they can get the answers they want and take the next steps and not be hindered by the process, but also not giving them so much where you can actually capture them in your system and be able to begin those communications and foster your relationship with them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. It is, I think, the challenge of our time in terms of, striking that balance between, really cultivating the relationship, fostering the relationship. I mean, I really do think that that's what it comes down to. In the end, everything that we're working on, everything that we're doing, is to really tell that story in a way that brings about that moment of connection, where the prospective student, right, is no longer seeing the graduate program or the institution as this thing that exists that might be a possibility, but instead has kind of made that heart-head connection, heart-mind connection, where they say, oh, this is where I belong. I belong here.
Yeah.
And kind of that, the art of that connection is a bit of what we work toward, and I think struggle with on a pretty daily basis. So we've also talked about kind of how to prioritize your day, how to know exactly who to reach out to and when to reach out to them. Why can it be challenging to focus on proactive engagement with graduate inquiries?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it can be a little is it's a little daunting to figure out where to start sometimes. As I was mentioning, the audience has just expanded, and not only just from the prerequisites, but in general, our goal, at least at JU, is to provide flexible programs that really cater to people, whether they're just coming out of their undergrad or they're a working professional. And that makes your age demographic huge. It makes a lot of different demographics difficult to pinpoint. And so figuring out who it is that we're targeting, who is our program really resonating the most with, can be challenging. And so I think that's actually how one of the ways that Capture has helped us is because it tracks their web engagement and some of those pieces. It has allowed us to connect some of that web engagement with our system so that we better tell, like, okay, this person's spending a lot of time on the web page, and get a little creepy in some ways and really see that and understand who might be a hotter prospect. And then, of course, through the people who do fill out our forms or do participate in our events, that's always a flag for us as well, that they're a hotter lead.
Yeah, I think you raise, several good points there. One thing that resonates with me is when you talked about kind of audience targeting, right? And how we are in this unique situation where kind of the idea of who a true prospective student is for any number of our programs, that the makeup of that audience, of that constituency, there's such overlap now, right? I mean, I feel like we're in a moment where we've created so many entry pathways for folks into our various graduate programs that it can be difficult to know that for this program, I'm speaking to a very distinct target audience that is different from all the other programs in my program portfolio. And in fact, I think this comes back to that law of unintended consequences. We've actually brought this challenge upon ourselves. So you do have to, I think, look for other ways in which to be able to track and attract that engagement, attract that interest. And you're obviously referencing Capture's Engage product, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a moment, because I know that you are using it for some identification work. I want to kind of take a step back. Let's take a look, for example, what you've been going through over the last year, what all of us have been going through over the last year. In what ways has COVID impacted your ability to identify new prospective graduate students?
Yeah, I think it's done some things that have actually helped propel us forward, if I'm being honest, and then some things that have presented challenges. So one of the challenges that we've been facing is that we have a lot more shoppers. So historically, I would say most people who, kind of to your 75% statistic that you gave earlier, most people who were exploring graduate degrees and professional studies degrees kind of knew, I'm ready to do this, I want to do this, and they were sort of doing that pre-shopping and then going for it. And now I would say because of COVID, we have a lot more general shoppers who are like in this weird limbo in their life and are trying to figure out what's happening with COVID, how that affects them financially, how that affects their schedules. Is this the right time? And so they're kind of pursuing it and they're interested, but they're a little more unsure and a little bit more uncertain. So I think in some ways we've seen a lot more interest, but a little bit lower yield on some of that interest than we have historically. Some of the positives I think that have come out of COVID is that, you know, we talk about how adult learners like to do things on their own and like to access things. And it's sort of really allowed us to propel and allowed our faculty to get on board with how we propel into the virtual world, doing more virtual sessions, doing more recordings, finding ways to reach students online on their times, on their terms, and really being more accessible to their schedules than we have in the past, and moving away from those traditional marketing efforts to more digital, social types of efforts.
Yeah, and I think real moments of authenticity, right? Have come out of that. Have come out of this. We were talking. We have at Capture a podcast called The Buzz, the podcast for higher ed. So I get to have fun with my colleagues, Jamie and Ashley, on that podcast every month when we record a new episode. And we were talking about the role of faculty in the recruitment process. And I think faculty have always, especially in grad, played a really significant role in helping to recruit and enroll new students. But in, I think, COVID times, we've actually been able to create some pretty interesting, and I'm using the term we as like universal, as in all graduate enrollment management professionals. We've been able to create these opportunities for real authentic engagements between prospective students and faculty. Faculty have become a little bit less distanced, a little bit more real, I think. It's not just them talking about the academic rigor of their programs or scholarship and research opportunities, but instead kind of pulling back the curtain. I mean, in some cases, we can even see where they live. Like you can see my guest room right now.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. And we do these virtual information sessions, and I have to give a huge shout out to the JU faculty because they've really stepped up and worked so well with us since COVID happened to make everything that we've been doing possible. And a lot of that is that. I mean, I remember we were doing an information session and someone's dog started barking, and it was fun for the students too, because I think we're all in the same boat together, and you're just like, that happened. Yep, there's my dog.
Yeah, well, you just wait, Kristen, because we're getting close to mail delivery time. So I'm sure we're going to hear my dogs any moment now. Listen, one of the things I wanted to ask about is about your young alumni and your graduating seniors. So, let's see, right now we're in January. So a lot of those seniors who are going to be graduating are likely thinking about, or have been thinking for some time, about whether or not they're going to give this job market a try, or they're going to go right into graduate school. Do you actively recruit your alumni and your graduating seniors, and do you consider them automatically to be active graduate prospects?
Yes. So we do. I would say that with the asterisk that we're continuing to grow that and work harder on how we do that and put a little bit more process behind it. But we have a lot of collaboration with our Career Resource Center and with our alumni group, and they help us out a lot. So our alumni group does a monthly newsletter. So a lot of times we'll highlight programs in that monthly newsletter that allow us to reach those. And occasionally some of the alumni groups have some strong social media presence. And so like nursing is a big program at JU. And so they have kind of their own alumni group. And so when we have specific things coming about with nursing, they'll share that for us in that group for them. As far as the graduating seniors, I think faculty has also played a huge role because we've worked on new curriculums that are more appealing to them. So we've been working on building out a lot of one-year programs. So that way there are programs available for students to graduate within 1 year with an MBA or a health informatics degree. And then we also have been trying to do more what we call 4+1 or 3+1 type programs to allow students, even when they're freshmen, to kind of already be on this graduate path. And so that's how we've really been working closely with faculty and with the undergraduate department to engage those students while they're still working in their bachelor's.
That's great. I mean, I think that those academic pathways make complete sense. What I love to hear is that you are all having that conversation far earlier than, say, the spring semester of their senior year. So that's a really good thing to hear. In terms of some of the newer things that you're doing, what tools, what strategies are you relying on to generate interest and identify new graduate prospects?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we've been doing is what we call lookalike audiences. So our digital marketing team, we do all of our digital marketing in-house. We have an amazing team for that. And what they do is we pull kind of the inquiries that we've been getting for our various programs, and we feed that into Facebook and Instagram. And they're able to create a lookalike audience so that they're not just targeting the students that are in our system, but students that mimic the demographics of the students in our system. And that's really allowed us to expand who we're hitting. But I think the other thing is we have started that was a big reason why we brought Capture on board, because that was really helping us with like the very top of the funnel, but we were still struggling with that conversion in more of the app submission, app completion phase. And so what we've done is a lot of the digital marketing brings them to the website, helps them with that retargeting ad. And then when they're there, we utilize the different capture tools, which, sorry for people not using Capture yet, this is my Capture lingo, but toasters and PID forms. And we've used those in a variety of different ways in the different funnels. So like the PID forms are something that is a form that pops up that allows the students to fill it out. And we've actually not only done that just to capture inquiries, but for any student that's been an app started and hasn't completed, find out, to kind of find out where they're at in the process. Like, are you still interested? Do you need to talk to a counselor? Are you just waiting for something? Like or are you not interested anymore, so that we can go ahead and move you out of our funnel and stop emailing you constantly? I think it's been really huge with that. And then we've also been not started it yet, but looking at yield efforts too, and how to move the deposits. So that's allowed us to do it based on web engagement, which has been really helpful for us.
That's great. I'm going to, I think, show folks a little bit about what it is that you're talking about, because you're right. You do have some.
Sorry,
No, I think it's great. Look, if you become a Capturite, you learn Capture lingo. So it makes complete sense. So just to show everyone on the screen here, you see that this is the website of Jacksonville University. So it is there. I think this is the homepage, if I'm not mistaken. And then this is the Jacksonville website when a PID, a progressive identification form, has launched. So I want to take, let's pull back the curtain one step more, Kristen, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Let's use a real Jacksonville student example and show how Capture's Engage software helped identify and really is actively still currently influencing this student as she considers her decision as to whether or not to fully pursue enrollment at Jacksonville. So this is, and for the sake of privacy, we have altered the name, but this is Ashley, everyone, and this is Ashley's journey. She's been very active and engaged in the short amount of time that we've been measuring her engagement with the jacksonville.edu. So you can see here that this is Engage, Capture software on the back end, measuring Ashley's engagement with Jacksonville virtually. And this is specifically a snapshot in time from January 3rd through until January 11th of this year. So this is recent activity. And you can see here that Engage first recorded Ashley on the ju.edu on January 3rd. That was the first site visit recorded. There you see that homepage that Ashley made it to. And then right that very day, she became identified after completing that short form fill, that progressive identification form, Kristen, that you mentioned. She completed that identified her. So what does identification mean? In this case, what identification means is that Ashley visited the site. Engage did not know who Ashley was, had no information on Ashley other than she was a unique visitor with a specific personal display device ID, or something that comes from an iPhone or a tablet, or an IP address if a PC is being used. This form triggered. Ashley went ahead and filled out the information on the form. When she hit submit, the Engage code basically married the data she was submitting on the form with that personal display device ID, or that IP address. So that way, any information that existed in Engage prior to that identification moment is archived now as part of Ashley's student profile. And your counselors would have access to that information. And conversely, any visitation to the website and any pages on the jacksonvilleuniversity.edu that she visits from here on out will be measured, and you'll be able to measure that engagement. So to your point earlier, knowing who to contact and when, you will be able to monitor that level of engagement and make outreach decisions based on that information. Shortly thereafter, the next day, in fact, Engage, now knowing that Ashley is in inquiry status, served a little pop-up, or as you refer to as a toaster, again, more capture lingo, this time with a call to apply, right? That apply call to action, which Ashley did take you up on. She started submitting her application, started that application on January 5th. Didn't complete the process, obviously. So Jacksonville, being Jacksonville, wanted to make sure that Ashley knew exactly what steps she had to complete in order to be ready to be considered for an admissions decision. So basically, the start of that application triggered an email communication that explained the application completion process, which Ashley received and opened on January 5th. And then ultimately on January 11th, she came back to the site to update her application. So that provides a lot of information. Overall, it's hard to believe this happened in just basically 8 days. But in 8 days, Ashley had visited the site 11 times, had viewed a total of 71 pages of information. And during that time, Engage was able to, on Jacksonville's behalf, provide messaging to Ashley to request that information, to start that application, and ultimately to complete that process. That was one student's journey so far. Kristen, do you have any last comments to add?
I don't think so. I think the only other thing I would say, and I'm sure my peers would agree with me, with grad, the other thing that's been nice about being able to create these types of communications is that it can be challenging when each program is different. I think that's what makes grad really different from undergrad, is that each program really needs its own unique comm flow and its own unique approach to enrollment. And so being able to create such dynamic stuff to capture those students is helpful in the identification process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you're spot on. The program specific messaging is so important. It's one of the reasons why folks like you create great communications, not just talking about the overarching graduate student experience that happens at an institution like Jacksonville, but also that program-specific messaging, the value statements of those programs. It's super important. It also means it's super nuanced. So a lot of folks often need some help with that. And if you're fortunate, you'll have some good partners to join with along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time. Give this audience a peek behind the curtain at what is happening with life at Jacksonville and the Jacksonville University and Capture partnership. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great one.
You got it. Take care. All right. Always great to talk to a Capture partner. I hope you all enjoyed that as well. I think it's nice to get insights as to what's happening on real life campuses, not just hearing from what happens on the company side of those of us who are hoping to help out. Well, listen, this is a new year. 2020 is behind us, thankfully. So it's a new year. It means it's a new, fresh start. So put another way, for our purposes, a new year brings us fresh, new opportunities using old data. So let's go ahead and talk about what some of those new opportunities with old data are. Look, here's the thing. Old data can be, well, frankly, it can be pretty priceless, especially for those of us in graduate recruitment and enrollment, because the data we have at our institutions is actually centered around actual people. So a data-centric approach is actually a people-centered approach. And many of these people, so a lot of this data that represents people, may now be interested in our graduate offering. So this is particularly true now, as Kristen mentioned. We know that interest in formalized graduate education is up across the country as people are looking to retrain, to reskill, to otherwise power their careers, in some cases their bank accounts. So let's take a look at how to use some of this old data to create some really solid new opportunities for people and for us as graduate enrollment professionals. So I want to start off just talking about specific types of data and the way in which we can message to these individuals to help convert them, to help transition them from that moment of inquiry to deeper stages within your enrollment funnel. So let's look at first cold inquiries and non-responders. We have a lot of these. These are people who inquired but never took that next step. That doesn't mean they enrolled somewhere else. In many cases, life happened to them to prevent their enrollment. So reach back out. And remember, these are cold inquiries, so there's no need to tell your story all over again since they've already heard it. So instead, remind them of what a graduate degree makes possible, right? The career advancement, the salary boost, the esteem that just comes with obtaining that graduate credential. As for your non-responders, these are folks who you likely acquired through a list purchase. That's the mailman, if you can hear that, the dogs. These are people, your non-responders are folks that you likely acquired through a list purchase. So we're thinking things like GRE Search Service, or maybe from one of those graduate guide platforms I mentioned earlier, or even the membership of a professional organization, say, that like aligns with your specific academic discipline. So they're non-responders because they never responded to you. For many of these folks, they did indeed enroll at another institution. But for others, life happened to them too, just like your cold inquiries. So you can benefit from reaching out to these folks with a brief burst of storytelling. Again, they've heard a bit of your story too. So just a brief burst of storytelling. They'll appreciate those same nudges that you're providing to those cold inquiries. So listen, don't expect a whopping 20% response on this type of activity. Frankly, a response of 1 to 2% would be ideal here and well worth this low to like no cost initiative. All right. Okay. Graduating seniors. We mentioned these in our conversation with Kristen. So I will tell you that I was so glad to hear what she said, because I am always amazed at how little we do to recruit our graduating seniors. I remember once I used to staff a table at the end of April where graduating seniors would have to go through this last minute checklist with all these administrative departments. So I would be at this table in one of the gyms of the university, and the students would have to go through these table by table by table moments of getting this punch card punched. And one of those was graduate admissions. And they were also doing things like checking with financial aid or the registrar, getting their cap and gown. But they'd have to come by to the graduate admissions table. And this was a complete waste of their time. It frankly was a complete waste of my time. I mean, this was April, right? These decisions about whether or not you're going to graduate school, or whether you're even interested in graduate school, should have been made quite some time ago. So this was not the best way to cultivate a relationship with our undergraduates or communicate the value of our graduate offerings. I was like the last person they wanted to see in that gym. There had to be a better way. And I'm fortunate to report that, yes, there are institutions that email their undergraduates about graduate offerings or hold special information sessions or open houses, but there are folks who are doing even more. They're looking for ways to create meaningful pathways for these graduating seniors, particularly now in a moment where the job market for them might not be as robust as it was certainly pre-COVID. Some institutions are even going so far as to pre-admit their undergraduate students based on their academic performance and the skills and knowledge acquired as an undergraduate student. There is no other population that you have more data on than your own students. So making an admission decision regarding them should be among the easier things that you're able to do. So work with your faculty on those type of things. More on that in a moment. Young alumni. So you have the data on your young alumni and you know how they performed in undergrad just as well as you do your graduating seniors. So young alumni should indeed be considered as graduate prospects. And I'm glad Kristen mentioned that that's the way she treats them at Jacksonville University. After being out in the world of work for about 2 to 3 years, they've achieved some of their first real professional successes, some of their big wins. And at the same time, they've also experienced some of their first professional setbacks. So this is a good opportunity to remind them of their home away from home, remind them of that undergraduate experience and that lifelong learning partnership that you forged with them, because they might be ready to take you up on some of those graduate opportunities that are available at their alma mater. So you'll get a better return on your communication and time spent with younger alumni, but that doesn't mean that older alumni should be ignored. So my recommendation is to periodically provide them with updates on the wonderful things happening at your institution in grad. You'll often find that your colleagues in alumni relations and university advancement are really willing partners for some type of periodic touch point that's focused on grad. So connect with them for their ideas. It could be a really powerful collaboration. Prior first year undergraduate inquiries and apps. So this is old data that I like to call gold data because it is so valuable. It is data that is about 4 years old, 4 to 5 years old. Your friends in undergrad have a ton of it, literally tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of contacts who are graduating undergrad now or have recently graduated. These were the high school seniors of 4 or 5 years ago that had taken the ACT, that had taken the SAT, or had just attended an open house or inquired in some other way, but ended up not enrolling at your institution. But they've heard a little bit of your story, granted through the undergraduate perspective, and now may be the time for you to tell your graduate story to them. Look, this might not produce a huge return either, but these folks should be considered as part of your graduate student search effort. Listen to this. This is an example. Even a 1% return on 5,000 undergraduate business prospects, right, that you're now treating as graduate leads, all right? That means potentially 50 graduate business inquiries. That's a solid amount of potential tuition revenue on something that, other than human time, costs $0 to deploy. The same is true for those prior transfer inquiries and apps. Of course, now obviously you're looking at data about 2 to 3 years old. Communicate with them just as you are these former undergraduate inquiries. All right. Not long ago, I provided a webinar called Future Forward, 5 Rules for Reengagement. I detailed messages and campaign ideas for these specific populations, even some others. For instance, I didn't talk about the wonderful data you have on all of those people completing letters of recommendation and how they can help you identify prospective graduate students. So if you have the time, head over to capturehighered.com/webinars, and you'll find a whole archive there. Take a look at Future Forward 5 rules for re-engagement. It'll provide even more recommendations than we have time to cover today. All right, so now let's move on to some really interesting ways to identify and influence prospective graduate students, relying on new data, specifically data that's been informed by behavioral intelligence. So you remember the Jacksonville University website. Here's that website on behavioral intelligence. Our Capture Engage software is running in the background, knows that someone interested in graduate education has arrived, and with this behavioral intelligence, Engage, Capture software, informs the website to trigger a short form specific to grad. It is behavioral intelligence that was gleaned by measuring Ashley's engagement on the Jacksonville site that prompted the deployment of 3 unique content campaigns, all tailored to Ashley's visit history on the site as well as her current admission status, because there is communication between Engage and the Jacksonville CRM. So let me take a moment to explain this a bit more crisply. All right, so in everything we do at Capture, we focus on being the absolute best in these 3 areas: identifying interest among prospective students, forging and nurturing the relationship to foster conversion and progression through your funnel, so prospective students happily take that next step and respond to that next call to action, all of which are leading to that next step, number 3, that next step of the mission fit with the student fit, which creates that moment of enrollment opportunity. So identification, conversion, and enrollment. These are what I refer to as Capture's essentials. So we do all this work in a clear, transparent way that provides for measurable results and your ability to understand the return on your recruitment and enrollment marketing investment. So how do we do all this? The answer is behavioral intelligence. Surprise, there's that word again. And since our inception of as a company, Capture has sought to fundamentally shift how institutions engage prospective students, because we believe that measuring prospective student engagement allows us to maximize all of those recruitment activities, serving the right message at the right time when that prospective student is most ready to receive that information. So it could be that it's early in the morning that they want to receive that information, when they're having their coffee, getting ready to start their day, or perhaps it's after midnight when they finally are home from a late shift. Behavioral intelligence understands this, understands when they are ready, and triggers automated outreach that accommodates that specific individual, that unique person, based on what Engage has measured, what Engage has learned from their specific web behaviors. We've built a comprehensive behavioral intelligence platform to support this work with a lot of things, if you see here in the top right under solutions, that you will recognize: digital advertising, email marketing, graduate search consulting, social media advertising and marketing, even print. All of these solutions are powered by what we're learning through behavioral intelligence, which maximizes the efficacy, maximizes the return that you're going to get on that marketing intervention. And all of that, I should say, all of that is a managed service. So that means that our team, our account executives, our designers, our data scientists, our project managers, they're all serving as an extension of your team. They're providing the lift so that your staff is not just burdened by one more ed tech platform that's just dropped in your lap. It is so important for us to make sure that we are providing strategy, direction, and frankly, doing a lot of this work so that your team doesn't have to do it. Engage, our software, is designed to maximize that investment by making sure that as a premier marketing automation software for higher ed, specifically designed by higher ed for higher ed, that it is powering those behavioral intelligence infused marketing tactics that connect, that moment of connection, your institution's prospective students with your mission, with your vision, with the value of the graduate offerings that you provide. Very important to us. On average, 24% of prospects identified through Engage go on to apply. We spent a good amount of time discussing the ways to use old data in new ways in order to identify interest. So these are solid strategies because they don't cost a lot, right? This is your data. Old data is gold data. Other than the time that you're putting into it, there really isn't much more that is pulled from your budget. Engage is obviously a different story. But like I mentioned, at Capture, we're committed to data transparency, and this includes communicating that active return on your investment with us. So you can see here with this one case study, this is the Mortgage College of Education at the University of Denver, has seen a 540% return on their investment with us. We love sharing these ROI stories. We think it is that these are really powerful stories to tell. There are other ways to generate and identify interest. And I could talk about these at length, but know that these other ways that you see here on your screen are all about the creation of new data. So we talked about behavioral intelligence, and Engage as a way to create new data, to identify new prospective students. In the beginning of this webinar, we spent a lot of time talking about old data that can be used to identify interest in low-cost ways. These ways to identify new data, to identify new interest, this is going to cost a bit. So it's important for you to begin to think about the way in which you want to allocate that budget spend. Think about things like search services, like the Graduate Management Admissions Search Service, the GMAC, right? Providing access to GMAT test takers. Think about GRE Search Service. Think about consulting work that can be used to provide for an optimized, modernized way to deploy graduate student search using that service data that's available. Think about the types of partners that can be really important to optimizing that work so that you get that maximum return. The paid social prospecting. Kristen talked about the lookalike audiences. Social marketing, social advertising, it's really important. And there's great ways to target audiences in data-informed ways that allow you to get your value propositions of your specific offerings in front of students where they play and where they learn. So through Facebook, through Instagram, through LinkedIn, where they professionally network. Paid search is another wonderful vehicle that's going to provide you with the ability to identify new interest. You're going to be able to make sure that you are showing up on search engine result pages as folks take to Google and search for their academic program. You're also going to be able to show up in display advertising. So once Google has identified that this particular person is interested in, say, an MBA, information about your MBA programs, advertising specific to them, will follow that individual across the web as they continue that journey. That's all through paid search. Partners, organizations like Capture that are willing to partner with you, do all of these things in a very smart way that harnesses multi-channel marketing, all of which, again, is designed to maximize the return on your investment. All right, this has been a good deal of information. I want to make sure that I'm providing you with that actionable checklist. So as promised, here is that checklist. It's right here. Look, identify available old data, right? Take a look at all those different populations that I provided to you and determine where are you able to access that data at your institution. Identify the budget that you have available for new interest generation strategies, that new data, all right? Because it's by identifying how much you have to spend, that's going to inform how much you can actually do, right? So that's critically important. You won't be able to do all of this yourself. So determine which strategies you can do in-house and which of those will have to be outsourced. Fourth, research those potential partners like Capture, and then schedule meetings with those potential partners. All right. When it's time to schedule those meetings with prospective partners, I know that my colleagues would love to speak with you. I would love to speak with you. We're always happy to have those future conversations and to listen to what you're thinking, what you're doing, what you hope to do. So feel free to contact us and we can coordinate a time to talk about the upcoming enrollment cycle, what you have going on this cycle. In the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out with questions, thoughts, ideas. I'm always happy to hear them and talk about some of the things that I'm seeing out in the marketplace as I have literally hundreds of conversations with graduate enrollment management professionals doing great work across the country. In the meantime, I'm Jack Klett. Special thanks to Kristen Kirkendall from Jacksonville University. And thanks so much to all of you for joining me today. As usual, as we say with every webinar that we close out, make it a great day, everybody.